Hello there, and a very warm welcome to Chazingdra Chats, the show where we take a stroll through the life stories of people in the Pokémon community, discovering the 6 Pokémon on their dream team along the way. I'm Charlie Merriman, merry by name, merry by nature, otherwise known as Chazingdra, a host and commentator for the Pokémon and Video Game Championship Series, and a content creator. And this week, as every week, I very much hope my guests and I can make your day merry, because I have the pleasure of being joined by adef, otherwise known as Clay. Clay, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you? I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to answer some deeply personal questions. Which is sort of antithetical to how I usually present myself. So we'll see how it goes.
So to start off with, what's your greatest fear? I'm joking.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent stuff. And yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you very much. We're working with an 8-hour time difference here, I believe, so thank you for joining me on this fine Monday morning. And for anyone who's not so familiar with you, adef, can you give a brief introduction to yourself?
Sure. So I guess in the Pokemon space, the thing I'd be most well known for is I make YouTube videos that combine Pokemon with math and science on the adef YouTube channel. And the goal of the videos is basically to reach a broader audience with science communication content that otherwise would not engage with it. And yeah, that's sort of my deal. I also stream on Twitch. I'm a speedrunner by trade. And that's sort of my whole thing, I would say.
Well, I mean, you're talking to your target audience right now. I am very much someone who wouldn't necessarily otherwise watch videos about maths and science, but applied to Pokemon, as I said to you before we started recording, I think what you're doing is really unique and I enjoy it very much. So an early shout out to go and check out adef's content because it's really fantastic. Brilliant. And, well, I haven't met adef in person, of course. I just messaged adef out of the blue because, as I say, big fan of your content, and so thank you very much for going along with that random message.
Of course. Yeah, no, I have friends who've been on the show before, and they spoke very highly of it and very highly of you, and I also am a VGC enjoyer, and so not completely unfamiliar with your work. And so and the questions you sent over are very thoughtful and interesting, so I think we're going to have a great time.
Fantastic. I fully believe we are as well. So let's do this, shall we? Let's just take that plunge.
Yeah.
And talk first of all about the first topic that you submitted to me, which is your parents separating, leading into your discovery of video games.
Yeah, so this is sort of my, you asked for sort of a life story, and I wanted to do it as it pertains to my career. And so this sort of first beat is largely about a very major life event at the beginning of my life, but also how it sort of transitions into me discovering video games. So my parents separated when I was very, very young, like super young, so much so that I don't remember it happening. But I think that event set the stage for much of my young life, because, as it would, navigating life with separated parents and also how it pertained to my relationship with each parent individually and my siblings. But that was all I really ever knew. But it meant that there was a lot of time where, I would be in, we have to drive to dad's house or like drive to mom's house or like, oh, you're with this person this weekend, whatever. And so something that very quickly came into my life was a Game Boy. And so, having Pokemon Red, which was my first video game I ever played, not just first Pokemon game, first video game was Pokemon Red. In fact, the game helped teach me how to read, when I was like 4 years old. And so that was a very formative experience to play that game. And I remember very specifically, I didn't know about saving. I didn't know what that was. And I think that's kind of a common experience amongst very young kids who played Pokemon in the early days, because the game doesn't tell you about it really. And I would just play until like breakfast is ready or whatever, and then I would just turn the game off. And then the next day I would start fresh from scratch. And I think that is, not to jump ahead, but I think that is probably why I like speedrunning so much. Is that I had no issue just resetting over and over and over again. Like, that did not bother me. But yeah, I would say that is my sort of entrance into Pokemon, and why it happened.
Mm. And as you say, I mean, your intro into games as a whole.
Yeah, completely, which is a
first.
huge part of my life. Like video games. I think I don't know how you feel about this as a person who also works with video games for a living, but like it is weird sometimes to realize how big a part of video games are of my life. Like, I think I take it for granted, a lot. I try not to, but I do. But B, like, you know, sometimes I'll be at a family gathering or whatever, and like they'll be like, "Oh, Clay's like the video game guy," and I'm like, "No, I'm not." But then I take a second, I'm like, "Yeah, I absolutely am." Like that's 100% what I am. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I do know exactly what you mean. I think even it was really coming out of lockdown that I really immersed myself back into games, and I would still, you know, even doing what I do now, I would be described as a gamer and think, no, that's not me. But I mean, how else? Of course, of course I am. So yeah, no, I totally sympathise with that. I see. Okay, and in that case, playing Pokemon Red on those journeys, is that your sort of most distinct memory of playing that game in the car?
Not in the car per se. I definitely did do that. My most distinct memory of playing Pokemon Red is like waking up in the morning and it was the very first thing I would do. In a lot of those mornings, grab it off the bedside table, immediately turn it on. And then, like I said, you know, mom calls up from the kitchen and is like, breakfast is ready. And I'm like, okay, just turn it off. Like, no reservations, immediately turn it off. I maybe made it to Viridian Forest. Yeah. Maybe if I was lucky, I probably was just watching that catch tutorial over and over again. Yeah. But yeah, I would say that is my most distinct memory playing Pokemon Red specifically. Obviously, I then went on to play all of them. But yeah, that for sure.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you have any recollection of the furthest you possibly would have got in one of those sessions? But yeah, Viridian Forest, respectable. Yeah,
I definitely eventually learned to save.
Yeah.
Eventually, I don't know how long it took. I couldn't tell you for sure. But I definitely eventually learned how to save, and I did beat the game. But I don't know whether that was months or a year or if I was playing it that regularly, because we had other Game Boy games too that my brother had gotten, who's much older than me. But yeah.
Can you imagine if this recording was the very first time you'd ever heard that you can save?
Dude, Pokemon? What a crazy revelation. My videos would have a whole new context if I if I just now figured out a basic function of the game. Yeah, what's Save? I don't know what that is.
yeah, so some Latin in my Pokemon game for some reason, but
it's just there for flavor.
Exactly, yeah. Pokemon Red was your first game. Do you recall, before getting that game, having an interest in Pokemon? Or was that sort of your gateway?
I think I was so young that I didn't really know what Pokemon was until I played the game. This is also, you know, this is like 2001, 2002, when I was playing it. And so, I mean, my brother had the trading cards. The anime, I think, was already on by that point. Well, for sure, because Pokemon the movie 2000 would have been in 2000. So the anime was definitely on by that point. And I'd probably seen maybe an episode or something, and I'm sure I had seen the trading cards around our home. And not long after that, definitely the trading cards became a big part. I think early 2000s was like the heyday, until now, the heyday of Pokemon TCG as like a collector's item for kids. And I definitely was a part of that. And then Yu-Gi-Oh! As an extension, but like a lot of Pokemon cards eventually. But I think up until that point, it was really just the game.
Yeah, understandable. That's I think that's a familiar tale to many. The then influx of Pokemon products that came just from that.
Look, hey, the Pokemon Company is very good at. We were very good at expanding that brand integration. Let's get the plushes and the cards. It's very good.
Yeah, 100%. And it might comfort you to know that you are not the first guest to have not realised that saving was an option in Pokemon. So
good.
You are in good company.
Excellent.
Sure. Now let's go from there to learning what the first Pokemon is going to be on your dream team. So as a reminder, the aim here is not for Clay to build the most competitively viable team in any way. It's just the Pokemon that have been the most special to Clay over the years, and he can find that in any way that he wants, and I have no idea what they are. Clay's decided on these in advance. So, Clay, tell us, what's going to be the first Pokemon?
Yeah, so my team is it's Rillaboom and Incineroar, and yeah. So my first Pokemon, because I picked my 6 favorite Pokemon. There's that website that made the rounds last year, or maybe the year prior, where like you select your favorite type for every generation, and then you like whittle it down to your 6 favorites. So I just went to that because I was curious, and I feel pretty good about the 6 that were listed as like my all-time faves. And then I tried to move my favorites around to fit the themes of the 6 like life events. You can be the judge of how successfully. So my first choice, which this is I think my second favorite Pokemon of all time, is Vanillix. I'm a big Vanillix enjoyer. I'm a big Gen 5 enjoyer. I think Gen 5 is peak Pokemon. Truly an excellent generation, gameplay wise, and the original Dex is fantastic. But Vanillix is like one of my favorites. I love the Ice type; it's my favorite type. And Vanillix is just so fun and smiley and cute. And I thought that this would fit the theme of like childhood and simplicity. There's not much extra going on with Vanillix, and I was a child who didn't know how to save the game. And also there's somewhere in there you can read the undertones of its 2 faces together and parents separating. I'm sure there's some undercurrents there. But yes, Vanillix is what I have chosen first. I really love this Pokemon a lot.
Wow. Well, I mean, first of all, Ice is also my favorite type. So
let's go.
Wavelength there, yeah. Fascinating. What do you think it is about Gen 5 that makes it your favorite?
Oh, where to even begin? It is one of the few generations that's actually reasonably difficult. And I like challenge in video games, especially as I age. The pixel art is fantastic. I love you, Pokemon Company, and I love the 3D model work. It looks really great, but I would kill to have pixel art back, even in just one game. It looks so amazing. And the pixel artists, especially at that time, were just really at the height of their game. And like in Pokemon Black and White, the Pokemon are constantly moving, but it's still pixel art. It looks so good. The music is so good. And it's one of the only fully original dexes. And I think it is a great original dex. I think the Unova regional dex is like really stellar front to back. People don't love Trubbish, but you know what? If you can be okay with Muck and Grimer, you should be okay with Trubbish. So yeah, I really love Gen 5. I think the towns are really memorable. The themes are really memorable. The Elite Four is the first Elite Four you can do asynchronously, where like you can choose to do them in any order, which I thought was so cool. And it's pretty difficult. Also, in my opinion, the best story in any Pokemon game ever, with like the cutscenes. And is such an interesting character. Getsis is such an interesting character. I'm a huge fan. I think Black and White is tremendous. I recently did just like a replay off stream and everything, just casually for the first time in years, and I really enjoyed it. But yeah, Gen 5 is fantastic.
Wow, okay, so for a plethora of reasons then. Yeah, I mean, these generations, all video games, they can just speak to us in ways that we can't define, really. And,
yeah, there's the X factor for sure.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. Yes, Trubbish, for anyone unfamiliar, and Garbodor. A bin bag Pokemon that evolves into a big split bin bag Pokemon, and of course Grimer and Muck, the Pokemon that are piles of sludge.
Yeah, and I like Grimer.
Generation 5. Yeah, well,
I like Grimer. I'm fine with Grimer and Muck, but by extension, I'm also fine with Trubbish.
Yeah, I mean, it's also it's part of Pokemon's appeal, I think, that there are kind of no limits as to what could be a Pokemon, and it's just exciting to see what is made animate next. So yeah, no, I totally agree with you there. So I wondered if your first choice was going to be your first partner Pokemon from Red, since that was your first game. What would that have been?
Okay, I do have 2 Gen 1 Pokemon on my dream team.
Oh yeah, if it's going to be a spoiler, then obviously no, save it.
I won't spoil it, but there are 2 Gen 1 Pokemon on there. I am a big Gen 1 enjoyer. I really love Kanto. I think it would not be shocking just because I grew up with it. And it was my entry into the series, so I'm a massive Kanto and Gen 1 fan, and I think the Gen 1 decks can do no wrong. And I regularly replay Gen 1, like once a year.
Yeah. Very interesting. Well, fantastic. So, Vanillux, welcome to the team, and now it's time to chill out with your next topic. Well, I say chill out, but it's actually the discovery of speedrunning, so quite the opposite.
Yeah, so when I was 13, I almost just quoted a Justin Bieber song lyric. When I was
Tell
13,
us about your first love. Go on.
I had my first love. No, when I was 13, I discovered speedrunning through rather unconventional means. I was doing Let's Plays on YouTube at the time, evidence of which you will not really find. But I did... Do you know who Nintendo Capri Sun is? NCS?
That name rings a bell, but not very familiar.
He's a very prolific Let's Player that is still around to this day. Really great guy. Tim is great. He and I did a race of Mega Man 1, which is an NES game. And we did that as like a Let's Play, where it was like a 2-part series where we just both played through the game to see who could beat it first. It was kind of a thing that was big in the Let's Play scene at the time. This is like 2012. And after we did that, I lost. But then I started looking up, well, how quickly can you beat Mega Man 1? Because now that I've beaten the game in one sitting, presumably it can be done quite fast. And so then I found a Twitch highlighter at that time. I think it was still called Justin TV. I can't remember, because I had a Twitch account for a long time for like Let's Play stuff. But I found a Twitch highlight of some Japanese speedrunner doing a Mega Man 1 speedrun. It was blowing my mind. And then I found a YouTube highlight of a runner called Dunnius doing a run of Mega Man 1 at a very early Games Done Quick event. And I just couldn't believe what I was watching. And I think that's pretty common for a lot of speedrunners and even for people's first experience watching speedrunning. It was so remarkable to me. And so I immediately started trying to learn strats and trying to get my time down. I started streaming on Twitch my speedrunning attempts with no cam, no splits, just the game footage. And it just really grew from there over time and became something that I would stream regularly as a hobby for years, including my very first appearance at a Games Done Quick event, which, for those of you who don't know, is a very large charity speedrunning event that is streamed on Twitch twice a year. And in 2014, so June or July of 2014, I was accepted to play Mega Man 1 at Summer Games Done Quick 2014. I was 15 years old, and my dad is on the couch commentating. And it was a landmark experience for my life, I think, and permanently altered the course of my life, because now in 2025, I just got back from AGDQ 2025, at which I am largely in charge of what happens in between runs now. I help run the talent team for, like, hey, we're going to have an interview. We're going to do a game show. Here's the pre-show. I also just ran Elden Ring at AGDQ 2025. So, like, this is still very much a part of my life. And I have a streaming career, and I think largely a YouTube career today, specifically because I found speedrunning in 2012. I think it is not a stretch to say that if I didn't start playing Mega Man 1 in 2012, I would not be making YouTube videos about Pokemon today in a very real way. Just by virtue of, life's countless connections that are innumerable and difficult to dissect. But it is really true. Like, I wouldn't have gone to GDQ. I wouldn't have met people that would push me to pursue content. I wouldn't have pursued content in the context of speedrunning, which then led me to, in the pandemic, doing it as a career. And that wouldn't have led me to take YouTube seriously. So it's a weird, interesting, intricate path, but speedrunning is a very important, very central part of my life and has been for weirdly half of it.
There we go, that butterfly effect. And
Yeah, right?
bundled up within what you've just said is, at some point, you created a YouTube channel, you created a Twitch channel.
Yeah.
What sort of, and you were collaborating with Nintendo Capri Sun. What was that journey like? Did you see a video and think, oh, that's what I want to do, or was it a more gradual realization?
So this is an interesting thing because it's a thing I forgot until recently. I live in Los Angeles and I make YouTube videos and I stream on Twitch for a living. That is my current job and life position. And if you told me that when I was like 10, I would have lost my mind. Because I recently remembered that was literally all I wanted when I was like 9, 10 years old, was to move to Los Angeles and make YouTube videos. That's all I wanted. And it sort of weirdly fortuitously has happened. But no, so I originally wanted to make YouTube videos because of that mid to late 2000s, early 2010s era of YouTube. I was really inspired. And so there, on some hard drive deep in some landfill somewhere, there are videos of like little sketches I made when I was 8 years old that no longer really exist. And I've had many YouTube channels over the years. Over the last 2 decades, I've probably had like 5 where I've tried different things. And most of them were before I was 14. Like, they're bad and horrible, but I tried because I really thought the only thing standing between me and full-time content creation is like, that next big video or whatever. And so a lot of things have inspired me, more specifically to change what it was that I was making. And for getting into Let's Playing, it was Chugga Conroy and Nintendo Capri Sun and Josh Jepson and Super Genius, that sort of era of guys that inspired me to do it. But yeah, I would say in general, it wasn't one particular thing, but like a lot of reasons that I wanted to have a YouTube channel, and weirdly now I do.
It's fascinating as well that you recently remembered that is all you've wanted to do. That must have been a pretty satisfying realization.
Well, it's one of those things where, like, I think we lack perspective a lot. I think that is a struggle in modern day life for a lot of people, myself included, is lacking perspective. And there are so many times in my day-to-day life where like the grass seems so much greener on the other side. And I think that's true for any position. No matter what your job is, there's something attractive about the other job. So like for me as a full-time content creator, I think, if I get I have a science background, right? I have an undergrad and a master's in science, and I could not easily, but somewhat easily go get a more traditional job, whether it's in data science or whatever, and make consistent money that I know is going to come in, which is not a given in content creation, and I could have health insurance. Those are like the 2 big things where I'm like, okay, the grass is so much greener. But on the flip side of things, I try to have the perspective of like, okay, well, but the people in that job would kill to make their own hours. And they would kill to not have anybody to answer to. So I think we lack perspective a lot. And a thing I've been trying to remind myself recently, especially in those moments that, you're an actor and a writer, so you understand this, I'm sure. But there are moments where I'm like, man, I'm not chasing that dream enough. I'm not putting enough eggs in that basket of like, I still want to be performing. I still want to be creating. But I am. And like, I also need to have the perspective of like, yeah, that is a dream of mine. But a dream of mine for many years was to do what I'm doing right now. And so, like, I have to be happy about that. And I am happy about that. And so that's a perspective I try to keep because it is difficult sometimes to have perspective. And it's so easy to get, like, annoyed about something meaningless these days, I think. Not to get too doom and gloom about it, but...
No, you're totally right. And, yeah, those grass is greener moments definitely resonate with me as well, but also take from someone who, was going down the acting route and then suddenly this Pokemon commentating, content creating thing came along. And it's a way to channel that performing creative energy, a platform that with content creation enables you to do it on a regular basis that the wider acting industry might not, just waiting for that phone to ring, for information to come through, whatever. So yeah, well, thank you for that insight, adef. And now it's time to discover what the second Pokemon is going to be on Dream Team. So who's joining Vanillux?
Zapdos. Super strong, super fast. I love Zapdos's design. It's my favorite Gen... It's in my top 2 Gen 1 Pokemon, I would say. But it is definitely in my top 6 all time. I love Zapdos. I think Zapdos is so cool. It crushes stuff quickly. Zapdos is the choice. Zapdos is a pure cool choice as opposed to Vanillux, which is more like, oh, I like this Pokemon. Zapdos is like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool.
Well, they're both pretty cool in their own way.
Oh yes, well,
they couldn't really be more different. Thinking about it,
yeah, they're pretty different.
Yeah, not only in their facial expression, but Vanillux is all about the curves. Zapdos is all about the spikiness.
Yeah, the jagged edges.
Yeah, I don't know if we can call an ice cream opposite to a bird, but they're not the same.
Yeah, I guess in the sense that rock is opposite of paper, then yeah, sure.
True. Yeah. That's a good way of rationalizing it. Yeah. Okay. So Zapdos, welcome to the team as well. We'll fly over from there to high school.
Yeah. So high school, I wasn't sure exactly what I would touch on here, other than I had a very bad middle school experience, and which I don't remember what the corollary is for Brits, but we like grades. Years 6, 7, and 8 were not good. And elementary school overall, K through like year 5, was fine. So I was really looking for a change at that time. I would go home and just like record Let's Plays or speedrun or whatever. I was constantly doing something else. And then I went to a high school. There were a couple of high school options in my area. And everybody I went to school with in middle school went to basically one of like 2, and I said, I'm not going to go to either of those. I don't want to be around you guys right now. Just not the best experience. I'm still friends with many of those people to this day, and they're very lovely people. But at the time, I needed to go somewhere else. So I went somewhere else, and I wound up having a lovely high school experience, which I think a lot of people, unfortunately, cannot say. But my years 9 through 12 were fantastic, really, really excellent. I really took a step back from content in general from like 2013 to 2017. It went to the massive back burner as I tried really hard in high school, made a lot of friends, and spent more time cultivating myself as a person. For better or for worse, you make mistakes and you also don't. Like, good, bad, the ugly, everything. Relationships, friendships, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So like a lot of very formative years, as they are, I think, for everybody. And then, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what else I want to say about it other than it was just like a very formative time in which content really went on the back burner for good reason. And I think was the first time that I started to see like, oh, maybe there's other things I would rather do with my life, which included acting and also science. And we can get into later which of those paths I technically chose. But I was acting a lot. I'm from Kansas City originally, which is in the middle of the country. And so I was acting a lot in the area, specifically at school productions. But, my mentors and the people in my life that were theater people were like, oh, you should do this. Like, you should pursue this as your career. And the high school I went to was a college prep high school. It was like a very diligent, studious, you will get into a good college, blah, 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 high school. And so I didn't see acting as a legitimate career at the time. And so I opted to focus on science and wound up going to school for science afterwards. But it was an interesting time to like find out who I was in a lot of ways, grow in a lot of ways. and sort of put video games behind me a little bit. I like, this was probably the era of my life, 2013 to 2017, where I played like the fewest video games, I would say. That didn't mean that I played nothing. I was still playing the new Pokemon game whenever it came out. I was still playing the new, I played a lot of Counter-Strike, regrettably, at that time. I think video games definitely went on the back burner for this era, but in a good way, as a lot of change was happening, both physically and emotionally, obviously. But yeah, that I would say is how that chapter went.
I'm sorry to hear about your middle school experience, but I'm glad that your high school one was a much better one.
Yeah, I think that is not an uncommon experience for nerdy people like us to have a few years where we can't really figure out what is going on and why everybody thinks we are weird.
Sorry, you calling me a nerd? I'm joking.
Yes, you host a podcast about Pokemon. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but...
Well, we've both learned something today. You've learned that you can now save in Pokemon. I've learned that I am apparently a nerd.
Apparently.
There we go. And it sounds like, as you say, the way video games took more of a backseat over those few years happened actually fairly organically. And I guess, whereas on the one hand we were saying you were just going with the flow and seeing what you enjoyed and going with that, at the same time, life had a way of saying, okay, so there's that aspect of you, park that for now.
Right.
And here are some other things that you might enjoy. And I guess, it's just staying open to all of those things that life offers. Your passion for science, which incidentally, of course, in a way, it's a good thing you did pursue that over the acting, given the video that you make now. But when do you first, was that just always there? Just your earliest memory, you always remember science was your favorite subject? Tell us a little bit about that.
I've always excelled in math and science in school, as many nerdy people do, I think. I have always loved math and science. It has always come very naturally to me, except for chemistry. I like chemistry. I'm very bad at chemistry. But yeah, it has always come very naturally to me, which I'm very grateful for. And I've always really enjoyed it. I've always done math competitions and science competitions through grade school, middle school, and high school. I'm trying not to be like braggadocious. I'm just trying to set the stage for why I'm so passionate about this. I remember watching a lot of Bill Nye the Science Guy growing up, which is an American program that you might be familiar with. But,
I've heard of it.
Yeah. So it's, I just really always, I remember I have a very early memory of saying things like, I want to be an inventor when I grow up, which is, I feel like nowadays, if you said that, you'd be talking about like Shark Tank. But I was, what's it called? Lion's Den in the UK? Is that, or Dragon's Den?
Dragon's Den, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Same show. Yeah, so I think nowadays you'd be talking about something like that. But what I meant was, I think, engineer. I think what I was actually talking about was like, I want to become a mechanical engineer. I want to create things. I want to discover things. And so one of the big reasons for that, here in America, we don't have like great public television. We don't have really an equivalent to the BBC. We have like syndicated, federally stipended programming. But locally, you'll have like a couple of channels you can basically get for free via cable. And especially back in the day before like satellite or before, what we have now where there's just 10 million channels. When I was growing up, we didn't have like a ton of money. And so we didn't pay for like a nice television provider. And so we only had, I think, 20 channels at my mom's house growing up. And one of the channels was just somehow the Science Channel, which is an offshoot of the Discovery Channel, or at least it was at the time. And all the other channels were not interesting to me. They were like the news. So growing up, I watched a lot of the Science Channel, which included, for Americans out there, programs like How It's Made, a lot of Mythbusters, shows like that just really engaged a young, scientifically inclined mind. and resulted in, throughout grade school and middle school and high school, pursuing sciencey things. And then I think, as it goes for a lot of people who go into any particular subject, just great teachers. When I was in high school, just really phenomenal teachers. Dr. Kimberly Cho, shout out. Mr. Tom Medlock, shout out. Just really phenomenal science teachers that engaged me. Bill Griffiths, a great math teacher I had, that encourage you to think about, like, hey, this is something you are gifted at and something you are, more importantly, passionate about. You can pursue this even just as a hobby. Like, you don't have to study it in school. Like, you know, there are ways to study math as a hobbyist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so in high school, I took a lot of science courses, a lot of science electives. I was captain of our Science Knowledge Bowl team, which is like a pub quiz team, but for science. And yeah, I loved science and was I'm still constantly enamored with science. I think it is so fascinating, and I think it's amazing what we are able to divine about nature. I think being able to put onto a piece of paper with math physical phenomena is so fascinating to me, and led into why I studied it in college. And I don't regret that at all. I am very grateful that I studied it in college, because I think it has, I mean, obviously it's led me to where I am in a very meaningful way, but also it's just cool. I just think it's cool.
Absolutely. What a passionate exaltation of science and math. And I mean, the way you put it, divining things about nature, it's really inspiring to you talk about that. And as you say, those teachers who just open our eyes to a particular subject, their importance, their significance, their value cannot be understated. So yeah, just to echo that shout out there. So wonderful. Now it's time to discover what's going to be the third Pokemon on your team. So who's going to join Vanillux and Zapdos?
So for the high school era, I have chosen Dragonite. Dragonair is my favorite Gen 1 Pokemon, but Dragonite I think makes this list more as like a more well-rounded choice. Take that or leave it. But I have chosen Dragonite to sort of fit this high school era of, like, not conformity per se, but like relaxing into a more well-rounded version of myself that wasn't completely focused on video games, and choosing to enjoy myself and try new things and focus on friendships. To me, Dragonite is a very happy Pokemon, a very silly guy who is very literally well-rounded, like physically. And I just really like Dragonite. I think the Dragonite line is fantastic. And so that is why I have chosen him.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah. And especially in terms of... It's interesting that Dragonair doesn't make the list, but I mean, you asked me before that I could be... You said to me before that I could be the judge of how well you'd adapted the Pokemon to the topics, and I mean, so far, a stellar job. And
thank you.
Makes total sense for Dragonite to be the Pokemon here. And I mean, yeah, Dragonite always has that aura about it, doesn't it? As that line is the only dragon type in that first generation of Pokemon. And so I'm sure that that Pokemon has stuck with you for a long time. Do you have a specific memory of why Dragonair is your favorite?
I don't know. I think I have fond memories of... I mean, first of all, seeing Dragonite on Lance's team in Gen 1 is very memorable. Seeing that and be like, what is that? Because that's the first time... If you didn't catch Dratini in the Safari Zone, then that is the first time you can technically see Dragonite, is on Lance. And I remember thinking he was very cool. Dragon type was very cool to me, as it was supposed to feel very cool. And then I think, getting the Dratini more easily in Gen 2, in the, like, I can't remember what the place is called. After you beat Claire's gym.
I think it is appropriately called the Dragon's Den.
Yes, that's right.
Actually.
Okay. Very appropriately, the Dragon's Den. Getting Dratini there more easily and then grinding that up to Dragonite, or trying to get the Dratini in the Safari Zone in Kanto. Those are very fond memories. And I just love Dragonair's design. Dragonair to me is such a cool design. The like wing tips on the face, coming off the face as like ears, I think are so fascinating and so pretty. And then Dragonite is just so silly. Yeah, love that line.
Yeah, well, absolutely. There is a lot of mystique, as we were saying.
Oh, yeah.
That Pokemon on that line. So, Dragonite, welcome to the team. Now it's time to go over to your move to Los Angeles, working for Naughty Dog, and then you moved to New York as well.
Yes, so when I graduated from high school, I, as many 18-year-olds are, was very rebellious, and that comes out in different ways in different people. For me, I wanted to get as far away from home as fast as possible. I didn't, I had been living with my mom, just the two of us, because my siblings had been to college and graduated and started their lives for years. So my mom and I, just the two of us, lived together for like 7 years. And we had gotten to the point where I was like, I can't live with you anymore. So at AGDQ, at Awesome Games Done Quick 2017, which was the coming spring would be when I graduated high school, I became friends with a speedrunner named Oven Donkey, which is a great username. And he worked at Naughty Dog, which is a AAA game dev studio in Los Angeles that makes Uncharted and The Last of Us and Crash Bandicoot. And we were at the event. He's a QA tester, and he was like, you should apply for a job. You should apply to work at Naughty Dog, because I have been speedrunning for a large portion of my life, and speedrunning is a pretty big aspect of speedrunning is finding glitches, finding bugs. And so I applied, and I speak some French, and they were apparently looking for testers who could speak a second language to test the other language versions of the game. So I had a leg up, and I wound up getting the job. And so when I graduated high school in May of 2017, literally a week later, or maybe even less, I moved to Los Angeles immediately. So like the fun summer break after you graduate high school, in between high school and college, I moved in with my brother in Los Angeles, and I worked like 80-hour weeks for like 3 months here in LA at Naughty Dog, and I loved it. It was just a very adult experience for me to, at 18 years old, leave home and have a quote unquote real job. And work like nutso hours. I truly had like no time to myself. But in a very real way, was again more video game experience, because I was testing Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. I was playing video games all day. I was using speedrunning. I got the job largely because they needed someone to beat the game quickly very regularly. So that was my role, was just to beat the game like all the time. And it was another experience of like, I got very lucky and I wound up with a job a lot of people would kill for. It was a very fortuitous meeting and a very fortuitous everything that led to me getting that job. And in a lot of ways, I think, again, is one of those butterfly effect moments where like, I don't know that I would have moved back to Los Angeles had I not already lived there. So it was my first time living outside of Kansas City for a long period of my life. And it was a very adult experience and a very harrowing experience and very fun. And was just a big act of rebellion that eventually led into, I went to college on the East Coast, on the other side of the country, which again, you'll notice is very physically far from Kansas City. That was intentional. I went to college in New York, technically in New Jersey, but basically in New York City. And I studied science there, but I had, as you know, said like, oh, well, acting isn't a real career. I'll pursue science. And so I did. However, I wound up in New York anyway. and New York happens to be one of the capitals of the world for theater. And so I just wound up in all my free time doing theater. And so it was sort of this like amalgamation of like, video games in the summer. And then once the fall started, I was truly just acting and pursuing science. And that's like all I did for like 4 years. And I think that combination of things, that like melding that happened when I was 18, has led to the exact YouTube channel you see before you. Of like, it's very performative, but I am talking about science and I am talking about video games, but it is very performative. I'm doing a lot of jokes. I'm doing a lot of stupid bits. And I also want the thing to look good and be produced well. And so, yeah, I think that is sort of how this journey happened in that era. And I'm very glad it happened the way it happened, but it's very silly that it happened the way that it happened. And very lucky.
Well, I mean, I guess it's one of those spoonful of sugar things without that performative element. The content of the videos you make could seem from an outside perspective to be that much drier. And
Sure.
again, it's just all part of the brand that you've cultivated. And tu parles un peu de français aussi?
Ouais, un peu. I don't get enough practice these days because I have nobody to speak with. But I studied French in high school, and I just had, again, really great teachers. And so I wound up learning more than I think the typical American student gets to with language, because as you may know, American students don't have great language programs at their disposal. We all just sort of speak English. But I was very lucky to have good French teachers. So these days, do I speak French? I don't know. Kind of hard to say. But when I was 18, yes, absolutely.
I see. And yeah, I mean, another example of just life finding a way. You knew you had that interest, that passion for acting, and lo and behold, just sort of by accident, all of your free time in New York goes to that. It was always a part of you, and it's glad that it was never sort of snuffed out. So that's brilliant to hear. And I tell you what, I recall playing Crash Bandicoot on the original PlayStation many, many years ago. In fact, just over last summer, I played the remastered, the
Insane Trilogy.
Insane Trilogy.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Well, actually, just the first one of those games. I've never played 2 and 3, but I will at some point. Yeah. So, well, fascinating to hear. And yeah. I mean, you say, yeah, of course you were very fortunate to be in that position, but you were also uniquely qualified for that job.
I suppose so. They had a very specific niche to fill that I just so happened to have the exact skill set for. Yes.
Exactly, yeah. So, but also, by the same token, they were very fortunate to have you by that logic.
Well,
so,
that's very sweet of you to say.
That's brilliant. Well, no, it's manifestly true. And now it's time to discover what the fourth Pokemon is going to be on your dream team, alongside Vanillux, Zapdos, and Dragonite.
My second favorite Hoenn Pokemon will be joining the roster. To embody my rebellious nature at that time, we have got Cacturn. I love Cacturn. I think his design is so cool. I think Grass Dark is such an interesting typing. I love his design. It's that simple. I think he's so cool. Seeing Cacturn on Sydney's team when you first enter the Elite Four in Generation 3, so cool. I love Cacturn.
Yeah. I'm now picturing, obviously this is representing this part of your life. I'm picturing the sort of scarecrow cactus version of you wandering through the streets of New York.
I mean,
going
basically,
to a theater.
Dude, going to open calls at like 3:30 in the morning on Broadway. Truly, I felt like a cactus. Awful. Awful.
Yeah. I'm not sure I've ever thought about, that description of feeling like a cactus, but it's very evocative, actually. Very evocative. Perfect. Cacturn, welcome to the team. So now, college and expanded life in New York, and your acting and your writing.
Yeah, so we sort of touched on how college was going, obviously, a lot
Yeah,
of science
right.
and then acting, and, discovering more writing and everything. But it was, let me pull up my notes here so I'm not speaking off the cuff. But yeah, so, discovering that not just acting, but also creative writing was so important to me. Has a real positive impact on, like I said, where I am today and what my channel is and who I represent myself as. And I think it's, again, a story of great mentors and just great teachers. We didn't really have a theater program at my high school, my college, literally. We had like a student organization that was well funded, which I spent a lot of time in. But most of the mentors that I worked with were in New York City and doing quote unquote real theater, whatever that means. And so, I was very fortunate to have great mentors in the city who pushed me to learn and grow as a performer, and find my voice in a meaningful way. And, I'm still doing theater to this day here and there. I am producing a show in LA in the next couple of months. We don't have a hard date set yet, but I'm producing for the first time a piece of original work on stage. And so, it's still a big part of my life. It's still something that's very important to me. And I think this era of living in New York and sort of spending a lot of time in the world of theater, seeing a lot of Broadway shows and off Broadway and everything, is very fundamental to who I have become. And also is partly why I moved back to Los Angeles, which, not to skip ahead, but is the last beat, was because to pursue a more traditional career in entertainment. And so here we are as a result of all that, I would say.
Presumably, the roles that you found yourself going up for had a sort of comic leaning. What
Yes.
sort of... do any particular roles stand out in your mind as favorites that you've played?
Great question. Weirdly, sometimes the more challenging roles are the ones that are more dramatic because that doesn't come as naturally to me. And so those can be very memorable. But I would say some very fun roles are like, there's a great play called The Musical Comedy Murders of 1940. It's a very silly comedy, but I played a character called Ken in that play, and he is phenomenally fun, incredibly enjoyable. There's a musical called Title of Show that I produced with some friends of mine in New York. I played.
That one, yeah.
Okay, excellent. I played Hunter in Title of Show. That was super fun. I loved that entire process. I would say those are two pretty memorable ones.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That first one you mentioned, I mean, that one I haven't heard of, but sounds joyous.
It's very stupid, but in a good way.
Yeah, and for anyone who's not familiar, Title of Show, I saw that at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I think there was a production in up there in 2013, I think it would have been. And the reason it's called that, I mean, you'll know better than me, but essentially it's a musical about people writing a musical about people writing a musical. Right.
Yes, yeah. They are in the show, they are writing the show that you are watching. On the pretense that they're submitting it to festivals and trying to get the show produced. Yes.
Hence the title of show.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's
what it says in the box on the form, and
the genesis of that, is that it's a box on a form that just says brackets title of show, and they're like, oh, well, we'll just call it that.
Yeah. Perfect. It's a really, really interesting concept. Had you found that before leaning into extracurricular drama and theatre and comedy, it was expressing itself in other ways over the course of your life?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was always not to use the words class clown, but like I was always the person in class trying to make people laugh, trying to, and even in my family, like I find myself I'm always making noises. I'm always being weird. Like I definitely crave attention. I feed off of attention. I love being the center of attention. Obviously that's annoyingly self-centered, but it's true. But also, there's a very real part of that I just love making people laugh. I find a great, very simple joy in if I am able to make other people laugh. My girlfriend, Arlie, I am constantly trying to make her laugh. I think much to the point of she will sometimes be like, I'm not. And I'll be like, she's like, when are you going to stop doing this thing you're doing? And I'm like, when you laugh, I will stop. Because I think that is a very important, I think that's a way I connect to people. And I think I crave that connection of like, oh, well, if I'm able to make somebody laugh, then I have worth in that relationship.
Right.
I think that is a very real part of my psyche. So yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. And quite Chandler Bing, I suppose.
I have been compared to him in the past.
So have I.
Yeah.
I think we're just sort of regional variants of each other.
Yes, exactly.
Terms. And yeah, of course, Ali, your girlfriend, Party Ali. Of course, for anyone not familiar, another content creator, Pokemon content creator, who makes wonderful videos. Very interesting. So from there, now let's learn what the 5th Pokemon is going to be on your dream team alongside Vanillux, Zapdos, Dragonite, and Cacturne.
So we've got another Gen 5 representative, another Unova. This is Chandelure. I think Chandelure is so cool. Fire Ghost is a great typing. But I chose Chandelure as like, this is one of my favorite Pokemon, but I chose it for this slot as like embodying new form is the theme I wrote down. So like Chandelure is a Pokemon, but also like an object. And I think in this era of my life, I was trying new things, and in acting, you are often embodying new form. And I think that is the loose connection I have attempted to sew here. But yeah, love Chandelure. Hugely cool Pokemon. I'm also realizing that like a lot of the Pokemon on my list are used on Elite Four teams.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Chandelure is on a Unova Elite Four. Cacturne's on a Hoenn Elite Four. Dragonite's on a Kanto Elite Four.
Vanillux is on the Champions team. Yeah. Unova, I believe. Yeah.
I think Black White 2 is on the Champion team. Or no, it is Black White 1. You're right.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But Woebetide any player who's going up against an Elite Four using Zapdos.
Yes.
The line is drawn at the legendary Pokemon. But,
luckily for us.
Yeah, as you say, embodying new forms. We were talking about Trubbish before, so I mean, finding new things to be Pokemon, that's a way it ties in as well, making it all the more a good choice here. And no, I think that definitely makes a lot of sense. I mean, as you were saying, being the center of attention, moth to a flame, Chandelure is definitely
yes,
enticing. I get maybe that's too much for me.
No.
Like maybe that's tenuous, but that's also
no more or less tenuous than my connection. So
in my mind, the spotlight, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Well, before we discover the final Pokemon on your dream team, tell us more about moving back to LA.
Yeah. So when I graduated college, it was amidst the pandemic. And I decided first to get my master's because I had nothing better to do. And it was only going to take an extra year. So I did that. But then I was like, well, I'm young. I don't have anything set in stone right now. My streaming career is sort of happening. Let's move to Los Angeles, which is the place where creators go. But also my brother's out there. My mom is out there. And it can be a chance to pursue acting in a more quote unquote legitimate way. Because New York, it is very difficult to make a living in theater specifically, especially in New York. It's a very hungry pond of fish, and it's a very small pool of food, and it doesn't really pay that well anyway, and New York is a very expensive place to live. LA is also expensive. However, technically, the acting work is a little easier to get and a little more lucrative. And by a little, I mean a lot. It's a lot more lucrative. Not that there's not film and television in New York, but I moved to LA and decided to pursue entertainment a little more seriously. But then in virtue of doing that, my career took off way more in the non-traditional entertainment side of streaming and eventually YouTube, and has sort of just resulted in being my performance. I am now making these YouTube videos where I'm performing pretty regularly. I get to stream very regularly, which is I'm very fortunate to do. And that's also very performative. And so there are a lot of ways that, I'm here in LA and I'm not doing a lot of traditional entertainment, but I'm still happy to be here. I love this city in a lot of ways. The food is phenomenal. And I'm really enjoying my time. It's been very nice and I've been, again, very fortunate to grow online in the way that I have. And I'm just really trying to ride the wave, not take it for granted, and enjoy myself along the way if I can, but also work hard because, you have to fan the flame when you have it, and you have to fan it hard. And so I'm trying. And yeah, that's sort of where I'm at today. We've taken the journey. Here I am.
And another link to Chandelier right there.
Indeed.
It runs deeper than I think you initially realised. It's reminiscent of Jake Sprague, who I had on the podcast back in episode 6. It would have been. This will be episode 41. Pokemon Unite caster, content creator, who also, really found their feet in LA and the improvisation scene.
Yes.
So I had a really fascinating chat with Jake. So do go and check that out, everyone, if you haven't already. And it's typical of life, isn't it? That I don't know if you have this saying in the US, but you wait ages for one bus and then two come at once, sort of thing.
Yeah. I'm going to steal that because I say something akin to that all the time, but I don't have the nice, colorful wording for it. Yeah, that happens all the time in life, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like you wait so long for something to happen, and then you have too many choices all at once. Yeah, that happens all the time. Like all the time.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that, you move to LA, right, let's make a concerted effort towards this performing career. And then the other side of things that was never supposed to
right.
grow in the way that it did, goes ahead and does that. And it was very similar to me when I was doing a one-man show over the course of 2023. And it was when I was leaning into that suddenly the Pokemon commentating and stuff started to kick off as well. So it's, and again, we just go with the flow. Which is
you gotta
this episode.
You got to take the bus that comes. You got to take the bus that comes.
Exactly. Otherwise, you're waiting for another 15, 20 years for that.
Exactly.
2, maybe 3 buses to come then. Anyway, And so, of course, bubbling along under what you've been saying throughout the episode must have been that whether you were working for Naughty Dog or whether you were in New York and then moving back, you were still streaming. So over the course of that time, was it sort of a gradual thing, and then all of a sudden when you moved back to LA, it really took off?
Streaming was always a hobby. I've been streaming since technically 2011, but really 2012, which is now 13 years, which is nuts. But it was in 2020 when the pandemic happened that I started streaming regularly. And by regularly, I mean like every day, which I think is actually a pretty regular experience among a lot of creators who came up at that time. And that is when streaming became a career for me, was in the pandemic. And so I grew a lot 2020, 2021 relative to where I had been, enough that I could do that as my work while I studied at school. And then when I graduated and moved to LA, I was like full-time. And then I would say only in the last year or two has it become actually sustainable. Like I think in 2020, 2021, 2022, I was making money, but like it was sort of tenuous, and like living in LA is pretty expensive, so I was kind of burning through my savings. But in the last year or two with YouTube, and my Twitch is doing better now, I've been lucky to like, I'm actually okay now. I'm not making like crazy money or anything, but like, I'm able to support myself, which has been a very nice growth. It took a lot of time, and it took a ton of effort, and it took a lot of luck. But we are somewhat here, and so I'm just trying to enjoy where I'm at now. But yeah, it wasn't really gradual, at least at first. For the first 8 years I streamed, it was truly just I would stream like twice a month. But yeah, now more recently I'm streaming because it's what I do. So it's interesting.
Yeah. That's fascinating. And when you were, at college, your work supporting yourself was streaming. Was there anyone else in your cohort who was doing that? Were you seen as a bit of an outlier in that sense, or how did that work?
So that was really only my junior year and my senior year. And no, nobody else I knew was supporting themselves through content or anything like that. My freshman and sophomore year, I had traditional work. I had a big savings built up because I had worked every year since I was like 14 is the earliest you can like legally work in the US. And I had always worked summers in odd jobs, lifeguard, working at a kitchen, whatever. So I had savings. So I didn't have to work during the school year much, which was nice. But in the summers, I would work at Naughty Dog or I would take tutoring jobs. And so, I was lucky that my freshman and sophomore year, during the studying year, I didn't have to work, which was very fortunate. And I think my degree would have been impossible if I was working alongside it. It was so difficult.
Right, yeah.
But junior and senior year, I was streaming alongside, which nobody I knew was doing.
What was it specifically that you studied?
I studied physics for my undergraduate degree, just plain and simple physics. And then my master's is in engineering physics, which means it's an engineering degree specifically with a physics leaning. And the concentration there is optical physics, which is like the design of lenses and mirrors and lasers. That is what I studied.
Wow. That's incredible. And I guess now is the time to ask, you said before that you realised recently that you had said when you were younger, all you wanted to do was create content. So when all of this stuff was taking off, when you moved back to LA, how did it feel, given that by that point you also then maybe had a bit of a change of tack and change of interest in terms of wanting to perform in a more traditional sense, as you said?
It's taken time to come to grips with the fact that this is the performance that I'm doing now. And that doesn't mean I can't go out for auditions. It doesn't mean I can't perform in a more traditional sense still. But it was difficult. There was a growth period. There was a depressive period where I was like, wow, I'm not getting any work in the thing I'm out here for. Especially, it's just been a dry couple of years in Los Angeles for everybody. For a myriad of technical, weird, communal reasons. The performance world here in LA has been really dry for like 3 or 4 years now. Post-pandemic has been rough. There's not a lot of work, and the work that you can get is all via self-tapes, which suck. It's just been rough. So I'm trying to count myself lucky that I found this other avenue because, my God, my friends who are still just hitting the pavement are having a rough go of it.
Yeah, for anyone who's not aware, self-tapes, you film yourself probably on your phone, recording a scene for whatever job you're going up for and submit it, sort of send it into the ether, into the abyss.
And then you never hear back or like...
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Clay. So now it's time to discover what the final Pokemon is going to be on your dream team.
The final member of my dream team will not be a surprise to anybody who is familiar with my work. My favorite Pokemon by leaps and bounds, Aggron, whom I'm realizing is also another Elite Four Pokemon in Hoenn. I love Aggron. Just the coolest Pokemon. I'm a big fan of Godzilla. And also I was a big dinosaur kid. And so I think Pokemon like Tyrantrum, Aggron, Tyranitar, Pokemon like this that look like big kaiju or like big dinosaurs with metal implements. Like, I love Pokemon like that. And yeah, Aggron, whose Japanese name is Boss Godora, which is literally just a concatenation of Boss and Godzilla. I love Aggron so much. My favorite Pokemon by miles. And to try to weirdly connect him to this theme, I sort of am finishing with I am who I am. Aggron is a very bold Pokemon. Boldness, self-identification, not being afraid to be who you are is my sort of tenuous link I've given to Aggron.
Yeah, that's I see it. Do you Was it a love at first sight thing? As soon as
yeah.
you saw Aggron in the game, you thought, right, that's it. That's my favorite.
Oh, yeah. Once I knew it existed, I don't know if I caught a Lairon in Victory Road, because you can catch Lairon in Victory Road just prior to the Hoenn Elite Four, and he's very close to evolving. I can't remember if I did that and then evolved it, and then that was when I first saw it, or if I saw it on Steven's team in Sapphire, because he is one of the last Pokemons you fight. I don't remember. But wherever I first saw him, I was like, oh yeah, that is so cool. And I still feel that way. Aggron's great.
Yeah. And it would have been a few months ago, I guess, at this point. You did a video about shiny hunting, and of course your target had to be Aaron.
Yes.
The pre-evolved form of Aggron, I guess we would say.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I did have that little inkling that Aggron will be appearing on your team somewhere. Okay, fantastic. So then, Clay, this means your dream team is Vanillux,
Yes.
Zapdos, Dragonite, Cacturn, Chandelure, and Aggron.
Yes.
Now I have to ask you, if you were to choose one of these Pokemon to be your partner Pokemon, which would it be?
So I feel like Aggron is a weird choice because I don't know that he'd be a great partner Pokemon, but I have to stick to my guns. He's my favorite Pokemon. He's the GOAT. I'm picking Aggron all day.
Aggron, yeah, for all the reasons you said. I mean, as I asked that question, I thought, surely it's going to be Aggron.
It is, yeah.
You know, we will dot the I's and cross the T's. And sometimes there are people who say, it's actually not going to be my favourite Pokemon for X, Y, Z reason. But there we go. It will be Aggron for you. And I mean, whereas in the case of Ash and Pikachu, say Pikachu rides on Ash's shoulders, I guess you would be riding on Aggron's shoulders.
Look,
around.
Man, happily, I will let him take me around.
Yeah. I think the people whose job it is to keep the streets looking nice in LA won't thank you as you're stomping around, sort of creating this sort of path of destruction in your wake as this heavy Pokemon lumbers around. But there we go. It's going to be Aggron, your partner Pokemon. And now a slightly different kind of question for you, Clay. If you were a Pokemon, what do you think you would be?
So I asked Arlie what she thought, because I truly could not come up with an answer for this. And she came up with Gallade for me. And I think I feel it. Gallade is like he's a very pointy Pokemon. Like he's very like, he knows who he is, maybe a little overconfident. I'm a very overconfident person, I think. But like he's got some intelligence and like some maybe science-minded stuff I see in like the psychic type. Maybe a little combative and argumentative in the fighting type. But I think Gallade feels pretty good. My first inclination was like Mr. Mime, but I think Gallade is a good answer.
Yeah, of course, my mind also immediately went to Mr. Mime for the performative element. But I think you and Ali have summarized that really, really well. In a way, in the case of Gallade, in the case of you, the fighting kind of combines with the psychic, as you say, to sort of using your intellect to reach new boundaries, and that's certainly what you're doing with your content. So I think that's a really good answer. But what do you all think? Let us know if you agree that you think adef would be a Gallade out of the more than 1,000 Pokemon that we have here now. It's interesting because often the way I approach this with guests is sort of, what type do I think they would be? And Psychic definitely makes sense. I think when you initially said Gallade, I wasn't so sure, but the way you've rationalised psychic and fighting definitely speaks to me right now, so I totally see it. But what do you all think? Let us know. And speaking of you all, it's time for your community questions. I posted online, as I always do, asking for questions for adef from you all. Thanks so much for submitting them, and I apologise as ever if I mispronounce your names or handles. So some interesting ones here. Starting off with this from, again, not sure about the pronunciation here, but Yared Cox, perhaps. Is there a project or theory you wanted to explore using Pokemon as the medium, but the games just didn't support what you were wanting to do?
This is a great question. Let me just pull up my notes, because I have a notes app that just has all of my like video ideas. I want to do something on Brownie in Motion, which is a very niche topic. in science, but basically there's this concept that is often talked about in quantum mechanics called the random walk. Basically, the idea, very basically, is like particles that essentially move randomly, and their position at any given time is effectively random. You can sort of predict them to be random. And this random walk, quote unquote, is like if you follow one particle and watch its random walk around its inhabited space. And there is a thing called Brownian motion that kind of describes this random behavior. And I was thinking like, oh, is there anything in the Pokemon universe that obeys Brownian motion or behaves in a Brownian way? And I have some ideas, but I'm not sure they're good enough to make a video. And also, I'm not sure my channel is big enough to just title a video about Brownian motion and have it do well, because it's so niche. But maybe one day.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've considered this. My initial thought on that front would be the roaming Pokemon.
That is not what I thought of.
Okay.
And is a very good... Hang on. Okay, I'm writing that down. Roamers. My initial thought was... you know how like in Pokemon towns, especially in the older games, there's NPCs that just like walk in little random squares?
Oh, sure.
That was my first thought, but your idea is way better. So I'll steal that and credit you.
You are welcome. Yeah, well, sometimes we just need a fresh pair of eyes, don't we? But
100%.
that does sound really fascinating. And again, talking to you more about your sort of favorite formulas, theories, theorems, indeed, within maths and science is something that I want to talk to you more about in our Patreon Rapidash round.
Okay.
But that's a really fascinating insight. So thank you for that question, Yara Cox, and thank you,
Yes,
Adef.
thank you.
And now this question from, I guess we pronounce it Xlin on Blue Sky. Quite simply, what's your favorite Pokemon generation?
A difficult question. I think my favorite single Pokemon game is Emerald. Because I think the Battle Frontier is the single coolest thing Pokemon has ever done. And I would be so ecstatic to see it come back in some form. But I think my favorite generation has to be 5. I think it has to be 5.
Yeah.
I love Gen 1, I love Gen 2, I love Gen 3 and 4. But I think 5 is my favorite overall generation from start to finish. I think it is nearly flawless. Yeah, love Gen 5.
Yes, I remember you talking about this before. And yeah, for anyone unfamiliar, the Battle Frontier in Emerald, a post-game, or I guess once you've beaten the Elite Four, feature a few different ways of playing the game, essentially. Some mini games isn't quite right, is it? Because they have more depth than that. But,
it's like hyper difficult battle scenarios.
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
very specific battle scenarios that are incredibly difficult. And getting all gold emblems in the Battle Frontier in Emerald is a genuinely difficult challenge. And it's just in the game, which I think is so cool. And highly recommend anybody that's looking for a big challenge in a Pokemon game, all gold emblems in Gen 3 or all gold prints in Gen 4. Genuinely really tough. Highly recommend.
Yeah. It's definitely something I want to take on at some point. Of course, yes, you mentioned Generation 5 before. So given that, I guess I'll follow up with, what would be your second favorite Pokemon generation?
I'll go 3.
Yeah.
It's also just the generation I've spent the most time in.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you very much, Adef, and thank you for your questions there, everybody. If you'd like to submit a question for a future guest on Chazingdra Chats, then you can find my socials on X and Blue Sky at Chazingdra. That's where I post the call-outs for questions for my guests. I would love to hear what you would love to hear. So then, Clay, we've heard a lot about you up to now. What's next for you?
I just want to keep making YouTube videos that I'm proud of and that I hope people will enjoy. I am working on a massive YouTube video right now, easily the biggest thing I've ever made. It will probably clock in over an hour. I don't want to give away too much, but it has to do with Victory Road. And yeah, I just shot the majority of the footage yesterday, and it is a behemoth. So I don't know if it's going to come out in January, but if not January, February. And I'm excited for people to see it. So youtube.com, adef. And that's what's next. That's what's next.
That's really exciting. And again, as a fan of your content, I will be waiting with tenterhooks for that to drop. That's going to be very exciting. Yeah, make sure you are following along on there, everybody. And finally, adef, looking back from now as someone who has made their name within content creation, streaming generally, all the way back to the young adef who not only once said that is what they would want to do, but also the adef who would first thing in the morning pick up that Game Boy with Pokemon Red, get as far as possible, shut it down immediately when it was breakfast time. What advice would you give to that young you?
Just stick with it. I think I wouldn't change a thing, honestly. I originally wrote like a joke answer to this question, and I think that's because honestly, like I wouldn't really change anything. I think it would be such minuscule changes. My advice would be like, everything happens for a reason. I don't know that I literally believe that, but I do think it's true. Like everything happens for a reason, and even the bad stuff that happens, like it all leads to making you who you are. And yeah, weirdly, I've wound up in a place that I wanted to be anyway. So, and I think that happens in a lot of ways, even in small ways in everybody's life. So I think my advice to my younger self, and also my advice to everybody, I think would be like, don't be disappointed in where you are. There is some facet of your life that young you would be really proud of. Whether that's who you've become as a person, or like the kind of upstanding citizen you are, or your hobbies, or your job, or whatever it is. There is some aspect of you and your life that young you would be very proud of. And so I think try to search for that.
I think that's really fantastic advice. And it's also amazing to hear that really looking back, you essentially don't have much that you would change. You don't really have many regrets, which I think is the ideal for us all to strive for. But I'm sure it's the kind of thing where in a parallel universe, there's a version of you that would, but it's just the mindset that you have now in terms of everything happening for a reason that has taken you to this point. So that's incredible to hear. And on that point, on a very niche tangent here, are you familiar with the Lemony Snicket series of unfortunate events? Books?
Tangentially.
Okay, sure. I guess it's specifically the film. It's not only when you said before, when you were younger, you want to be an inventor like Violet Butler in the books there, but also her sort of motto, more in the film that they made with Jim Carrey, is everything happens for a reason. So those couple of shout-outs made me wonder if that's something that you had read and seen.
I
as well,
definitely saw the movie
sense.
when it came out, I think.
Right.
I think I read the first book back in the day, but I don't really remember.
Well, if I was to give some advice to you now, give those another go. I think you'd, based on everything you've said, I think you'd probably really enjoy coming to them from this age. Pretty dark humor. I'm rereading them right now as well, and you appreciate when you're younger that they're dark, but I think when you're older you appreciate why they're dark.
Sure.
And interesting to come back to, but so I recommend that for you. Anyway, thank you so much, adef, and the chat does not end there, because as I've teased a couple of times during this episode, it's now time to get into adef Clay's Rapidash round, bonus questions, quickfire questions that Clay has not prepared for. Things like, we've talked about sort of favourite parts that you have gone up for and played, but perhaps scenes that you have improvised or roles that you would love to play at some point is something I'd be really interested to hear, because of course, again, as an actor/writer myself, and I'd love to know so far what your favourite video is from all of the things that you have put out there. Favourite formulas and theories that Clay especially has a soft spot for, things like that. If you'd like to get to know adef a little bit better, then join us over on Patreon. The link will be in the description below, where you can also support me as a creator. Fundamentally, I really appreciate the fact that you have listened to or watched this episode, so thank you so much. But if you're in a position to be able to support, then it would be fantastic to see you over on the Patreon. But for now, Clay, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you a little bit better, and, a little bit of imposter syndrome that I'm experiencing as someone who's enjoyed your videos for a very long time, to have been able to just hang out with you and chat. So thank you so much for the fascinating talk.
Thank you, Charlie. It's been phenomenal. Thank you.
Oh, I'm very pleased that you've enjoyed it, and the pleasure's been all mine. For anyone who wants to keep up with you online, adef, where can they find you? I'm
adef basically everywhere. I would say the biggest thing is YouTube, but also on Twitch. I stream basically 4 to 5 times a week. And then I'm on Twitter, Blue Sky, all that jazz.
Fantastic. And now a bit of YouTube spiel from this side of things. If you've enjoyed, please do like and subscribe, everybody.
Subscribe!
They really do go such a long way. Yeah, thank you, as adef can attest to. Drop a comment as well, because adef has given us such food for thought. Would love to know if any of adef's Pokemon picks tie in with what your own dream team of Pokemon would be, and if not, would be fascinated to hear what your dream team would be. So do let us know. Got plenty more episodes on the channel. This is, as I said, the 41st episode, and people within the content creation space like adef here, but also the competitive video game space, as well as Pokemon Go, Pokemon trading card game, Pokemon Unite as well, Spraggles, who I called out earlier, more casual Pokemon players, shiny hunters, etc. There's bound to be something for everyone, so if you're enjoying the format of the show, use the hashtag 6Pokemon 1 Life Story to spread the word about it. And I am on Blue Sky, X, TikTok, Instagram. Chazingdra is the handle that you need, and also on the channel I set myself various challenges to stream. I stream competitively, shiny hunting as well, and I'm currently trying to beat Pokemon Brilliant Diamond with just Ledian, who is behind me. I can't see in my preview there, but I've got my Ledian plushie representing. It is a wild ride. I've managed to just beat the 7th gym. We're nearly at the Elite Four, if you can believe it. And there'll be plenty more challenges where that came from as well, so make sure you're following along. I also make Pokemon flavored comedy skits. They're going to be on the channel and on TikTok as well. If you want to hop into my Discord community, come and join Chazingdra's Chocolate Factory. Be a member of the Merry Folk. That link will be in the description below as well. Episodes of the podcast drop every Wednesday, and if you have any suggestions for guests, chazingdra@gmail.com, as well as the handle @Chazingdra that I mentioned before. So then, adef, with all that spiel out of the way, it's now time to get into your Rapidash round. So if you're not joining us over on Patreon for that, then it's goodbye from adef.
Take care, everybody. Thank you for watching and listening.
And it's a goodbye from me. See you next time on Chazingdra Chats, where there'll be another 6 Pokemon, 1 Life Story. So then, Clay, how are you feeling about these bonus questions?
I'm ready. Let's do them.
You ready? Let's do it. You also haven't had breakfast, so we'll try and get through as swiftly as we possibly can. Talk to us first. Yeah, tell us about... You can define this however way you want. Be it a sort of dream roles of yours or favourite scenes that you have improvised, because improvisation isn't something we touch so much on in the main episode, actually. So yeah, run with that how you will.
Yeah, this is a tough question that I get asked so much that I should probably have an actual answer for it. But I often just say whoever will hire me. But no, that's unsatisfying. I think that I love...